You've been told your whole life that pornography is just entertainment, a harmless release, something millions of people do with no consequences whatsoever. And yet, here you are watching a video about what it actually does to your brain. Maybe that's not a coincidence. What I'm going to share with you today is not a moral lecture. There's no judgment here. This is a science channel, and we deal in evidence. What the evidence shows is this: pornography use, particularly frequent or habitual use, produces measurable, documented changes in the human brain. Changes to the reward system, changes to sexual function, changes to relationship satisfaction and emotional intimacy, and, in a significant percentage of men, changes that they did not see coming and did not consent to. This video is going to walk you through exactly what those changes are, why they happen, what the research actually says, and what you can do about it. If this is a topic you care about, please subscribe right now. This channel is dedicated to men's health topics that are too important to ignore and too rarely covered with real scientific honesty. No shame, no agenda, just the facts. Subscribe. It helps more men find this content. Warm, generous, confident. Deliver this like it's a gift, not a pitch. Before we dive in, I want to offer you something. We put together a complete porn-free life plan. It's a practical, science-based action guide, a week-by-week framework covering dopamine reset strategies, habit replacement, relationship repair, accountability structures, and daily routines to help you reclaim control of your sexual health. It is completely free. All you have to do is comment the word "free" in the comment section below this video. That's it. Just the word "free." We'll mention it again at the end so you don't miss it. Now, let's get into the science. The problem. Let's start with what we know about how widespread this is. Research published in peer-reviewed journals consistently estimates that more than 90% of men report having watched pornography. The average age of first exposure is now estimated to be between 11 and 13 years old. The average frequency of use among adult male consumers is multiple times per week. These are not fringe behaviors. This is one of the most common forms of media consumption on the planet. And yet, the conversation about its effects on health has been almost entirely absent from mainstream medicine, from education, and from public health discourse. Here is the question that the research is now asking and answering with increasing clarity: what happens to a human brain when it is exposed to a highly supernormal sexual stimulus repeatedly from early adolescence onward? The answer is not comfortable. But it is important. The human brain was not designed for the kind of pornography that exists today. Your ancestors had access to real sexual partners in their immediate social environment. The reward system in your brain, the dopamine circuitry that drives motivation, desire, and satisfaction, evolved to respond to those encounters. What it was not designed to handle is unlimited, instantly accessible, infinitely novel sexual imagery that escalates in intensity without limit and delivers the neurological hit of novelty over and over again without any of the biological, social, or emotional cost that real intimacy involves. When you expose that ancient reward system to that kind of modern superstimulus, things start to go wrong. And the research is now detailed enough that we can tell you exactly what goes wrong and in what order. The neuroscience. Let's talk about dopamine, because this is where it starts. Dopamine is often described as the brain's pleasure chemical. That's not quite accurate. Dopamine is more precisely the brain's anticipation and motivation chemical. It fires in response to the expectation of reward, not just the reward itself. And crucially, it responds powerfully to novelty. Every time you encounter something new and potentially rewarding, your brain releases a surge of dopamine that says, "Pay attention. Pursue this. This might be good." Pornography exploits this system with extraordinary efficiency. Every new video, every new image, every escalation in content triggers a fresh dopamine response. The brain never gets bored because the novelty never ends. The hit keeps coming. And unlike real sexual experiences, which require effort, vulnerability, emotional risk, and the physical presence of another person, pornography delivers that dopamine surge with zero friction and infinite variety. Over time, with repeated exposure, the brain adapts. This is called neuroadaptation, and it is one of the most well-documented phenomena in neuroscience. When a system is overstimulated, it compensates by downregulating its sensitivity. The dopamine receptors in the reward pathway become fewer and less responsive. The brain essentially turns down the volume on its own pleasure response to try to regain balance. What this means in practical terms, the same content that once produced a strong response now produces a weaker one. The user needs more stimulation, more intensity, more novelty, more escalation in content to achieve the same effect. This is the same mechanism behind tolerance in drug addiction, and it produces very similar behavioral consequences. Brain imaging studies, including research using fMRI technology, have documented structural changes in the brains of heavy pornography users. Decreased gray matter volume in the striatum, a key region of the reward system. Reduced functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for impulse control and decision-making, and the reward circuitry. These are not minor, abstract findings. These are changes that affect how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in their daily life. The psychiatrist and neuroscientist Dr. Norman Doidge, in his work on neuroplasticity, documented cases of pornography users who experienced dramatic escalations in what content they required to produce arousal, men who began with mild material and, over months or years, found themselves drawn to content they would previously have found disturbing or repulsive. This escalation is not a character defect. It is the brain's tolerance mechanism operating exactly as it was designed to. Sexual dysfunction, the physical cost. Let's talk about pornography, induced erectile dysfunction. Because for many men, this is where the problem becomes impossible to ignore. Research published in the journal Behavioral Sciences and other peer-reviewed publications has documented a significant and growing phenomenon: younger men in their 20s and 30s, experiencing erectile dysfunction that is not explained by cardiovascular disease, hormonal imbalance, or other traditional causes. Men who can achieve erection during pornography use, but not during real sexual encounters with a partner. This is the dopamine desensitization problem made physical. The brain has been calibrated to respond to the super stimulus of pornography, the visual novelty, the infinite variety, the absence of social or emotional demand. Real sexual intimacy, by comparison, involves a real person with a real face and a real emotional presence, which introduces vulnerability, imperfection, and the neurological demands of genuine human connection. For a brain that has been heavily conditioned on pornography, real sex can feel, neurologically speaking, understimulating. The response that should be automatic simply does not fire the way it used to. This is reversible. That is important to state clearly. The brain's plasticity, the same property that allowed these changes to occur, also allows them to be undone. But reversal requires abstinence from pornography, often for an extended period, sometimes months, to allow the dopamine receptors to resensitize. This is not quick, and it is not easy, but it is documented and it is real. Beyond erectile function, research has also documented effects on libido. Many heavy users report a paradoxical reduction in genuine sexual desire for real partners despite high levels of pornography consumption. The brain has been trained to associate sexual arousal with a screen rather than a person. And on sexual satisfaction, studies show consistent reductions in sexual satisfaction with real partners among frequent pornography users compared to non-users or light users. Relationships. The relational consequences of pornography use are perhaps the most consequential and the least discussed. Research published in journals including the Journal of Sex Research and Computers and Human Behavior has documented consistent associations between frequent pornography use and reduced relationship satisfaction, reduced emotional intimacy with partners, and increased rates of infidelity and relationship dissolution. There are several mechanisms at work here. The first is the partner comparison effect. Pornography creates unrealistic expectations for physical appearance, sexual performance, and sexual behavior. Over time, real partners whose bodies are imperfect and whose sexual behavior involves genuine emotional complexity begin to be measured against those expectations. The research consistently shows that this comparison reduces attraction to real partners, reduces relationship satisfaction, and increases dissatisfaction with physical intimacy. The second mechanism is emotional withdrawal. Pornography offers sexual stimulation without the vulnerability of genuine intimacy. For men who are emotionally avoidant, and research suggests many men use pornography partly as an emotional regulation tool, habitual use can reinforce the habit of seeking stimulation without connection. The result, over time, is a progressive difficulty with real emotional intimacy, not because the man doesn't want connection, but because his brain has been repeatedly rewarded for avoiding it. The third mechanism, documented in multiple studies, is the effect on the partner. Research shows that discovering a partner's pornography use, particularly heavy or habitual use, is experienced by many partners as a form of betrayal, producing symptoms of trauma in some cases, and consistently producing reductions in self-esteem, body image, and sense of sexual adequacy in the partner. The relational damage is not one-sided. One study followed couples over time and found that beginning pornography use during a relationship was associated with a more than doubling of the likelihood of divorce. That is a finding that deserves serious attention. None of this means that anyone who has ever watched pornography is damaged, or that every relationship touched by this issue is doomed. The brain is adaptable. Relationships can heal, but they cannot heal without honesty, and they cannot heal without understanding what the actual mechanisms of damage are. Mental health, the psychological cost. The mental health associations are also well documented and deserve attention. Studies consistently show elevated rates of anxiety and depression among heavy pornography users compared to non-users. Research has documented associations between pornography use and reduced self-esteem, heightened social anxiety, and impaired executive function, the capacity to plan, regulate impulses, and follow through on long-term goals. There is an important nuance here. Researchers distinguish between pornography that causes distress, where the use itself creates psychological symptoms, and pornography used that a person experiences as compulsive or out of control, regardless of whether it meets any formal diagnostic threshold. The term pornography use disorder has been proposed in the clinical literature, and while debate continues around its formal classification, the subjective experience of compulsive use, failed attempts to stop, and the negative life consequences that result are well documented in clinical populations. Perhaps most concerning is the effect on attention and the ability to experience natural rewards. The dopamine desensitization that occurs with heavy pornography use does not only affect sexual response. Dopamine is the currency of motivation across all domains of life. When the reward system is desensitized, everything that requires sustained effort, work, learning, physical exercise, creative projects, social connection feels comparatively flat and unrewarding. Men who cut out pornography frequently report, as one of the more surprising benefits, a significant increase in motivation and engagement across all areas of their lives. This is not anecdote, it is the neuroplasticity principle operating in reverse. The resolution: what to do. All right, here is where we talk about what is actually in your control. Because everything I've just described is the product of neurological processes that are, to a significant degree, reversible. The brain changes, and the brain can change back. Step 1. Honest self-assessment. The first step is the one most men skip. Before you can change a behavior, you have to be honest about what it actually looks like. How often are you using pornography? Is your use escalating over time, requiring more intensity to produce the same response? Have you tried to stop or reduce and found it harder than you expected? Has it affected your sexual function, your relationships, or your motivation in other areas of your life? Honest answers to these questions are the foundation of any real change. Step 2. Understand the mechanism, not the moral. The research is clear that framing pornography use as a moral failing is far less effective for behavioral change than understanding it as a neurological process. You are not weak or broken if you have found this difficult to control. You are experiencing the operation of a reward system that was designed to be responsive to sexual stimuli, encountering a product specifically engineered to maximize that response. Understanding this, actually understanding it, changes the nature of your relationship with the behavior. Step 3. A reset period. The clinical literature consistently supports a period of complete abstinence from pornography, not as a permanent moral commitment, but as a neurological reset. The dopamine receptors need time without the superstimulus in order to resensitize. Most research and clinical experience suggests that meaningful neurological recovery takes a minimum of 30 to 90 days, with some individuals requiring longer depending on the duration and intensity of their prior use. During this period, real sexual desire, genuine libido oriented toward real partners, typically returns, often with notable intensity. Erectile function, where affected, typically improves. Motivation and mood typically improve. Step 4. Replace the function, not just the behavior. Pornography often serves a function beyond sexual release. For many men, it is a stress management tool, a boredom escape, a source of emotional numbing, or a way of avoiding relational vulnerability. Attempting to remove the behavior without replacing its function is one of the primary reasons attempts to quit fail. What is pornography doing for you beyond the obvious? Whatever that function is, you need an alternative. Exercise, physical competition, creative work, genuine social connection, therapy. These are not cliques. They are neurological substitutes that engage the same systems in healthier ways. Step 5. Address the underlying patterns. Research on compulsive pornography use consistently identifies associations with attachment insecurity, histories of emotional neglect, social anxiety, and depression. These are not excuses. They are information. If there are underlying emotional patterns driving the behavior, addressing those patterns through therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy, both of which have strong evidence bases for compulsive behaviors, dramatically improves long-term outcomes compared to willpower alone. Step 6. Rebuild real intimacy. The final step, and perhaps the most important, is the deliberate rebuilding of genuine intimacy capacity. This means practicing vulnerability in relationships, pursuing real emotional connection rather than avoiding it, and, for those in partnerships, honesty. The research on couples who have navigated this issue successfully consistently highlights honesty, professional support, and intentional relationship investment as the key variables. Healing is possible. Relationships can recover. Sexual function can be restored. But none of it happens accidentally. Everything I just walked you through, the self-assessment, the reset period, the habit replacement, the daily routines, the relationship repair strategies, we have organized all of it into one clean, practical document. We're calling it the Porn-Free Life Plan, and it gives you a week-by-week framework to actually implement what this science is pointing to. It is completely free. Just scroll down right now and comment the word free. That's it. Just free. And we'll make sure you get access to download it. This is the kind of resource that used to cost money, require a membership, or exist behind a paywall. We're putting it in the comments section because we think men deserve access to this without any barrier. Comment free, and it's yours. I want to close with this. The science on this topic is not about judgment. It is not about telling you how to live or what to believe about sexuality or morality. It is about giving you accurate information about what is happening in your brain and your body so that you can make genuinely informed choices. Most men who are struggling with the effects of habitual pornography use, the sexual dysfunction, the relational distance, the motivational flatness, have never been told that what they're experiencing has a neurological explanation. They think something is wrong with them personally. They feel shame, but not understanding. And shame without understanding produces paralysis, not change. If this video gave you something useful, please share it. There are men in your life who need to hear this information presented honestly and without shame. Subscribe if you haven't already. We put out content like this every week. And please, comment the word free below so we can send you the Porn-Free Life Plan at no cost. I'm Dr.CandidAi. Take care of your brain. I'll see you in the next one.